Companies want to use artificial intelligence or AI to help deliver content, but hold on just a second. There's a few things you might want to know before you throw your content into an AI installation and just let her rip. Welcome to Dope Content. I'm your host, Laura Burgels. And with me is co-host Scott Smith. And our special guest today is Val Swisher. Val is the CEO of Content Rules. She's joining us today from Silicon Valley. And her 2021 book, The Personalization Paradox, Why Companies Fail and How to Succeed at Creating Personalized Experiences at Scale. It's available now from XML Press. Okay, Val, you work with a lot of big companies, like huge companies, and many want to use AI to deliver content. So what is working and what is not working?
I'll start by saying I think companies really had a false start with AI and AI computing, dating back, I'm going to say probably 5 years or so, maybe. You know, the past 2 years don't count, so it might actually be 7 years or so. In the technical arena, companies started with this idea that they were going to put in chatbots. Chatbots were the gateway drug for artificial intelligence. I just think I thought of that. And there were a lot of false starts and there were a lot of mistakes made, and it really bombed, in my opinion. It really bombed. And I think there are many reasons why it bombed. First and foremost was that they really weren't prepared. And as you just said in your intro, you can't just stand up a cognitive system and toss your content into it and expect everything to happen. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I have seen companies make in all arenas with artificial intelligence. Is this, people seem to think that an AI system comes knowing something. An AI system comes knowing nothing. Nothing. It doesn't come with content. It doesn't come with data. It doesn't come understanding anything. So I think companies, most companies that I have heard of and worked with, really just thought, oh, I'm just take everything I have and just go put it in there, and then people will ask questions in a chatbot, and it's going to go find the information, and we're good. We're good.
I think we've all had really bad chatbox experiences. And I love that you write about, that personalization paradox. It's like, how do we create that experience? And everything that goes wrong with that chatbot experience, was it because they were just saying, let's just dump a bunch of content in?
I think that it was just not planned well. It was not well thought out, because I've seen chatbots, luckily they don't really exist anymore, where you ask a question and somehow it manages to retrieve a chapter of a manual and hand that to you. Right. But first, before it does that, you say, I want to know how to configure the widget. And it says, okay, I think you want to know how to configure the widget. Is that right? So I'm already annoyed, because it's like, yes, that's right. That's what I said. I want to configure. Why are you verifying this with me? And then it says, okay, hold for a moment while I find that information for you. Right. And then it comes and gives you a chapter. And I think it was poorly conceived and poorly executed from the very beginning. The entire interaction, I don't know about you, but when I go on to chat with, in a shopping experience now, I've already got the heebie-jeebies. I'm already looking for the chatbot going, there's no way that this is going to go well. But I can't wait for email, and I'm certainly not picking up the phone and waiting on hold. This is instantaneous. It's the best I'm going to get. I'm going to brace myself because this is not going to be fun. And eventually, maybe it'll take me to a human.
It's like we've been trained to expect a bad experience.
I have. I don't know about you. I mean, I absolutely have.
Well, I mean, I understand like the screening that humans do and human customer service and chatbots, but if you have come in there with a specific problem, and I mean, a customer service person, a human has no way of gauging your experience. A chatbot has less experience. So it's always frustrating when the first question is, have you checked to see if it's plugged in? And just like you want to go, do you know who I am? And, but it's just like, it's very interesting to me that some of the chatbots, they just like are so quick to go gray because they've concluded that they've solved your problem. They might as well just start their sentences with, well, actually.
That's a really great point, Scott. It's a really great point. And, there are so many things that were done poorly, not because anyone wanted to do it poorly, but it was kind of like they didn't do their research and they didn't know better when we first started in this whole arena. And it's almost like there's the people part, there's the information itself, there's the training of the engine, there's the narrative around the experience, which is its own set of content rather than kind of the content that we're looking for. It's getting better. It's definitely getting better. I should tell you, I had a great experience with a chatbot about 3 days ago.
Wait,
I know.
What?
I was shocked.
What happened? What went right? I want to hear the whole details. Right? I am hanging on your words. What happened?
I know. I will give the kudos to Amazon. I sent a gift and I got a message with a photograph that said your package has arrived. And now they give you a photograph of the front door. And it wasn't the front door of the house that I was sending it to. And I ended up having to ask the person, did you happen to get this box? It was supposed to be a surprise. And they were like, well, no, I haven't. And I'm like, of course you haven't. This is not your front door. Do you recognize this front door? No, I don't know where that front door is. All right, I'll go back to Amazon and I'll tell them you delivered this to the wrong address. So I went on to the chat and it was absolutely a chatbot without a doubt. And I put in, it asked me a few questions which were pertinent. What do you need? And is this about an order, blah, blah, blah. Yes, delivery didn't happen, right? Or delivery error, I think, or delivery problem. And I typed in, the box was delivered to the wrong address. And it said, okay, do you know the front door? It basically said, have you tried like checking with your neighbors? Fair enough. And I said, nobody knows the front door. And it basically said, okay, we'll deliver another one tomorrow. It took 3 seconds. I mean, really, it didn't even take a minute. We'll deliver another one tomorrow.
They had to have a whole process in place to make that particular situation go right, because there was a whole lot of moving components to that interaction.
Yep.
What do you reckon, in your estimation, did they do right to make that happen?
Okay. First of all, let's start by acknowledging that I wasn't asking for content. So that's sort of a different case than when we're trying to serve up content. But what they did right was, first and foremost, they understood what I was asking. They understood what the problem was, and they didn't repeat it for me 17 times in 18 different ways. They gave me the option to select, to get to the point where I could specialize exactly what happened. right? So it was a problem with an order. It was a problem with delivery. It wasn't frustrating. I just had a couple of clicks and then it said, please describe your problem. And the first time out, it understood. And it didn't come back and say, oh, it looks like you're having a problem with the delivery because, you just want to throw yourself out a window. It gave me a suggestion of what I might do to solve the problem on my own. Right? Have you asked your neighbors? I think that's perfectly valid. And when I said, I don't know who to ask, it understood that I wasn't saying no. I was saying no because. So it really understood the natural language processing and the sentences, and even if it wasn't a full sentence, the key words that I was using made sense. It was a very well-trained engine.
Right.
It didn't have to verify it with me 17 times, and it knew how to resolve the problem. So that whole mechanism that you were just talking about was in there. It was in there. And it was able to make a decision. That floored me. It floored me that it was able to make a decision like that.
I'm very encouraged to hear this story. It makes me feel a lot better about the future. Let's turn that around though and say, okay, let's extrapolate what you just said and say, how do we apply this to delivering actual content? What do we need to do to make that work just as seamlessly or as flawlessly as your Amazon experience?
Yeah. And let's tease that apart because there's multiple pieces to it. Let's first talk about the content itself. In the book, which I'll hold up again because I can, we talk about what you need to do to the content in order to provide a personalized experience. And one of the most important things is to componentize that content to the appropriate level so that you have, like the three bears, you have not too little content and not too much content. You have just the right amount of content to solve the problem.
The Goldilocks zone, they call it in astronomy. Yeah.
You need the Goldilocks of content.
Right.
True. I feel a blog post coming on the Goldilocks of content. Coming to a website near you. So you need to make sure that the content itself is prepared to answer the questions. And by doing so, you're going to componentize that content and you're going to tag that content so that it is easy to find, readily searchable. Now, that's just one part of it. So the content, there's two parts. The content has to be findable and it has to be relevant. That's really the key to a personalized experience and really the key to making an interaction with an AI engine pleasant. I'm trying to find the good word. As good as it can be. And I think we're going to get better at it, but as good as it can be. So relevant content that's easy to find. So that's what we need to do to the content, on its own.
I get that. It's like that whole Goldilocks analogy works for me because at the beginning you said, yeah, you talk to the chat box, give me a minute, and then it delivers a whole paragraph. It's like, oh, that's way too much. I could have read all that myself. I just need to find that one little piece of that is useful to me. And then the other part is like, it's way too little, where it's just asking you something or doing that pretend reflexive listening where it just repeats back stuff that you've already said that you're going, we've already established that, move this along. It's too little. First, too much, too little, but to get to that just right sweet spot, we need to really componentize it with tagging so that it can drag out the exact right piece that we need. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what you're hearing. That is absolutely correct. What you're also saying is we need to work on the content, and we need to work on the narrative that the content is framed in for the chatbot. In other words, don't validate with me 7 times that I need, to know how to change the battery in my key fob. I said it once, just go get the information. So that part of the interaction really needs to be swift. It does not need to sound like a person. Once upon a time, we thought we needed to make chatbots sound like people. I think we're better off letting people know you're talking to a chatbot. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as I get the information I need as quickly as possible, I'm fine with a chatbot.
You know what? I am too. And I'd like to know what other people's feelings on that are. So if you could, if anybody's listening right now, pop that into the comments of, wouldn't you rather know that it is a robot you're talking to? I would prefer, isn't there some kind of ethics too that says, hey, you're talking to a robot versus you're talking to a human being? I want to know. And instead of trying to fool me to say, oh, I'm talking to a person right now, I want to know. I don't think I'm alone in this. And I am totally fine with talking to a robot as long as it's a really well-trained robot.
So I do see, and it seems like it's more of a case with larger organizations are just staying up front that I am an artificial entity and I'm going to help you with this problem. If you see somebody that's built a chatbot in Office 365 for a smaller business or some other tool other than Office 365, it's not always clear until you interact with it that you're not really talking to somebody named John or Mary. You're talking to a few ones and zeros. And so that kind of tempers, if I know up front, what I'm talking to or who I'm talking to, that's going to affect how I interact with it. So I can talk conversational English or assembly language if I know it's a bot.
I would agree with that. So the content itself, the narrative around the content, and in order for this to work well, what we really need to do is a very good job of training the AI engine. And I think that's part of another part of what failed in the past is that companies don't understand that training an AI engine is a very heavy lift. There's nothing fast about it, and there's nothing easy about standing up an AI engine. Sure, we're getting smaller applications that will do a certain amount with less. But when we're talking about a fully functioning cognitive system, let me take a second to make sure everybody understands what goes into training one of these engines. There are multiple steps to standing up a cognitive system. And the first step is getting your corpus together. Now, when you get your corpus together, you really do want to get as much content as you possibly can in your corpus, but you need to curate it. You need to make sure that what the AI engine is going to keep and hold on to is accurate, up to date, pertinent. I would say well-written, but that's secondary. You have to curate the corpus because if you put garbage into your AI system, you will get garbage out of your AI system.
When you say corpus, that
Yes.
might be a new term to a lot of people. Could you tell us what a corpus is?
It's every piece of content you have about that topic. So, for example, in 2012, IBM Watson won at Jeopardy. It was a big, big deal. I actually have a photograph of it was an entire room that this computer took up. There was so much computing guts to it. There was no doubt that Watson was going to win Jeopardy. Because, do you know about this? Do you know what the corpus of content was that they loaded into Watson when it played Jeopardy?
What?
It was all of Wikipedia. All of Wikipedia, the whole thing. So pretty much any answer you were going to see is in Wikipedia, right? The humans didn't stand a chance against Watson. So the corpus was Wikipedia. So for a company, the corpus might be all of your technical content, all of your knowledge base articles, everything, everything that's customer facing. You want to upload all of it, but you want to make sure you have to curate it either before you upload it or after you upload it, one or the other. It's going to have to be curated, because when you first start a cognitive system, it can't know what's correct from what's not correct. It doesn't know what's accurate from what's not accurate. That happens over time. If you don't curate it, someone once asked me this question, well, won't machine learning eventually, kind of filter the garbage to the bottom? And it will. How long do you want to wait?
I really like the Watson example. I didn't know that about Wikipedia. And the idea that, yeah, you have to put this entire corpus in that might be absolutely huge. And you're doing that in your own organization. I'm trying to think of all the tagging that had to happen for both the Watson situation, and then what happens when you do it in your own organization, that you can't, like I said, let's just dump it in there and see what happens. Something has to happen. And yeah.
So tagging in a cognitive system that has machine learning built in works very differently from what we're accustomed to. When you train the engine, and I'll explain what you do to train it, the system itself creates its own, I'll call it a system of connections between content. It learns this and this go together. This and this go together. So it's actually not looking at metadata like humans look at. It's creating a very complicated scheme, usually using something called an artificial neural network to, like our brains, to make associations. That's the word I'm looking for, associations. So I have to upload my content and I have to curate my content, right? Then the system ingests the content, and that's where these associations start to be made. They start. But then I train the engine, and that's where the smarts come in. I have to train it so that it can continue to learn when I'm done. Okay, so we've heard of machine learning.
Yeah.
How do I train a cognitive system is usually the next question.
I'm sorry, I'm just going, yeah, keep going. Yeah, how are we going to do that cognitive system? How do we do that?
You train a cognitive system using question and answer pairs of accurate questions and accurate answers.
Okay.
You have to feed it these questions and answers. So you ask it these questions and it produces what it thinks might be an answer, and you say yes or no. You vote it off the island. Some systems, you ask it a question and it'll produce 5 answers. And it'll say, I have 90% confidence that this is the answer you're looking for. I have 70% confidence that this is the answer you're looking for. I have 50% whatever. And you tell it, oh, this was actually the answer I was looking for. And now the algorithms realign themselves. And eventually the worst answers do fall to the bottom. But this is how you start this whole process. You feed it questions and answers that are accurate. And then when you ask more questions, it says, I found many answers. If it only has one, it'll give you one. But, oh, I found many answers. You tell me which one is the right one. It's almost like you're playing a game with the engine.
But you know what? We keep coming back to the game, and we've used so much game analogy, the Jeopardy thing. But then you're saying, okay, now we're developing true and false questions or quiz show sort of things. And over time, the artificial intelligence program gets better and better at making those assessments and judgments of what goes up. In short, it becomes a better player and someone that's better to play with. So it improves the experience of game that you're in.
That's one way to think of it. Yeah, that's definitely one way to think of it. The less garbage you put into it, the faster you're going to see the results you want. And machine learning takes over. Think of it like a human brain. When we're presented with enough information and we're repetitively told this is right, this is not right, even as children, we can then take those associations and start applying them to other things. It's that type of scenario. I'm really bringing this to a conversational level. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of scenario that is how the machine continues to learn. It draws its own conclusions.
Right. Now, do larger companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook have an enormous advantage in this because they're dealing with such a lot of people and such a wide range of people, and it's such a wide response of people that their learning can get better and better over time and start eliminating a lot of the fringe and nuanced answers, yet still not really eliminate them, but keep them in the background. Is that part of the scenario as well?
Yes, you've taken us to a very interesting area. I don't mean to be cynical. However, the entity that controls the information is the entity that has the most power. So these various cognitive systems where these very large companies are sort of competing, they're competing for all of that knowledge, all of that content, I will say, because in our case, the knowledge is the content. So if I can get all of an entire industry to use a single platform, then that platform will have an enormous amount of information. And that platform will become incredibly valuable. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting to kind of watch who's making the biggest advances. And really, you're absolutely right. Companies like Google, like IBM, they have huge advantages because of the amount of data content they have access to. And their results will get better and better. Do you remember, have you ever used Google Translate?
Yes, almost on a daily basis.
Okay. Google Translate's gotten much, much, much better than when I wrote my book on global content. Back in the day, when it was first starting, when it gave you a translation, it would ask you whether or not that translation was accurate. And if it wasn't, it would give you an opportunity to put in a better translation Do you remember that?
I kind of vaguely remember something like that with Babelfish before Google acquired it. Yeah, that does sound familiar.
We were all training. We were training that engine. It's very, very interesting to me that it always surprised me that it was asking the people who were looking for the translation whether or not the translation was correct, but somehow that worked. Now there's a whole new paradigm that they use in neural machine translation, which I won't get into right now, but we were training an engine by voting the translations off the island or letting them stay.
You know what? Now that you mention it, when I am in Google Translate now, what I see is sometimes I'll get a green checkbox that says verified translation, meaning that I'm assuming that they actually had humans look at that and say, yes, that is actually something a human would say and not a machine translation. So I am not seeing too many wild mistakes like I used to in the early days of Google Translate, where they were trying to go word for word and really botching it sometimes when they do it when they took that approach to it, because that's really not how languages work.
Scott, were you gonna jump in?
Yeah, I do remember that when Google first rolled out its image search, that the way that they got the descriptions of visual content was they put images out there to X tens of thousands of people and asked them to describe it. And then they mined the most common responses. And so that was the original incarnation of show me, here's my search. Okay, you give me the websites. Okay, show me just the images. And I assume they're still doing things like that to an extent, but I think they're probably getting more machine input from their image search now.
Visual recognition is one of the most advanced AI, I don't want to say industries, but parts of AI, of all the things that AI can do. Visual recognition has come an incredibly, incredibly long way. And there's a whole series of things that happen to get it there, including a number of competitions. There were a number of competitions that helped get it there. So yes, you're absolutely right. And now that machines can pretty much recognize anything, they continue to learn on their own. Because if you analyze enough faces, then first of all, you know what a face is and you know where the eyes and the nose and the mouth are, but then you can get really specific and know, oh, that doesn't match the face ID of the person I have. You can get extremely specific, right? And you know when, oh, this is a new face, but you know it's a face, you know it's a dog. Very rarely do I see AI systems make a mistake anymore. Is it a dog or is it a wolf?
I have my own funny story about that from Google's recognition, or the visual one, where you would put up a picture and it would tell you what it could possibly be. That had some problems. Once was I put up a picture of a glass, and it was a simple port snifter glass, and Google incorrectly identified it as a horse. And then this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I put up a picture of my face and smiled at it and said, I was expecting, woman, human, person, something like it. And the top response was pig-like mammal, which was technically true, but a bit offensive. And I'm like, I don't think HR departments would really want to use this for their visual identity or employee identity program, because it's really not specific enough. It's not helpful enough. And by the way, that could open you up for some lawsuits if I wanted to say, okay, I have been depicted by my employer as a pig-like mammal. Probably not really great.
Oh boy, I think it's gotten better. I have a presentation that I do, and I have a couple of slides. One of them is I put a picture of myself into, I think it was a Microsoft engine, and it was assessing my mood. And it said 0.9999% happy and 0.0001% disgusted. And I was like, it's probably true. I was probably generally happy, but just a teeny bit disgusted. And then I put up a picture of my younger son, Max, playing an instrument called a euphonium, which most people don't know what it is. It's a brass instrument that's sort of it's a member of the tuba family. It's a small tuba, a tenor tuba. And it was him sitting in a band playing, he's wearing his tuxedo and all this. And I had it analyzed, and it said it knew that it was a band. It knew it was a brass instrument. It said that the person was 32 years old. Now, Max right now is 23, and he was in college. So he thought that was the greatest thing ever, but it was fascinating at how much it could analyze of that picture. It was very, very interesting. It got it right. It really did get it right. So
talking about visual and machine learning too, one link that I put up on LinkedIn this morning was finger spelling for American Sign Language. There's a wonderful machine learning site where you put up your hand and it will actually train you the ASL finger spelling for, A, B, C, and correct you as you go forward that if you're doing it correctly or incorrectly and so forth.
That's fantastic. I need to go look at your LinkedIn post and look at that site.
I'll also pop it in the comments below.
Fantastic. I've been losing my hearing for the past 30 years. So having a site like that would be incredibly valuable. So
it's ridiculous how fast you can learn by using these machine learning systems as well, because it reflects and it gives you instant feedback on your performance, lets you know where you're going astray. For example, if your hand isn't really quite in the right position, it'll just go 80%, 90% until you get it where it needs to be.
That's fantastic. Again, the way these machines learn now and visual recognition is incredible. What's one of the hardest things for machines? This may or may not surprise you. Natural language processing, understanding how we speak, and natural language generation.
Okay.
It's incredibly complicated. We are very complicated animals, mammals. And the way we speak is a challenge. And visual recognition has come much further than natural language recognition, and particularly generation. I think I recently took a course all about this at Berkeley, and building an image is much easier than building a sentence. You wouldn't think so. I mean, to me, it's counterintuitive, but natural language processing has been coming along for decades, and there are some tools out there that use it to help people edit their content. So they're very, very advanced. Generation, on the other hand, I have a blog post topic that I haven't written yet, that's basically, will machines ever write the content for us? And what we have found is that we're at the point where machines have gotten pretty good at writing things that are very standardized, like taking a spreadsheet and making narratives. So for example, in real estate, it's 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet. The lot is 1.5 acres. It's 2 stories. If it is very regimented, it can do a great job. They have been experimenting where there was a natural language generation system that wrote a newspaper article, and it did an amazing job. it understood sort of like the lead and sort of how to get into different details and how to frame the details. Very, very interesting. You really couldn't tell that it was all made up by a machine. This is, really one of the places where they're doing a lot of work in natural language generation. You have to be able to process it in order to understand enough to generate it, right? The generation of it.
There's that, and I understand probably a component that would make it even more difficult is language is a continually living and growing thing, meaning that the phrases and terminology that we use today are different than the ones we used 3 years ago. And a lot of it is generated by technology, but a lot of it is generated by pop culture. And talk about writing the things that speak to your soul, that sing to your heart. Is this something that a machine is going to do well? I could be wrong. I could have dreamed this, but I swore I heard somebody doing a report that for their corpus, they put in all of the TED Talks and tried to get a machine to write a TED Talk based on the kind of cadence, style, word choices that people in TED Talks used. And it was hilarious how much gibberish it was. Yeah.
Yep. Which makes you wonder about TED Talks, doesn't it?
But yeah. You don't listen to a TED Talk the same way ever again because it's
no doubt. But it is fascinating to me, given that, you guys, a lot of your audience are writers, and everybody's concerned that their jobs will be taken away by machine. And I have no doubt that machines will be able to write technical content because it is pretty rote. It is pretty predictable. I do wonder whether machines will be able to write emotive content. Will a machine be able to write the next great American novel? Will a machine be able to produce music on its own that touches, your soul? Probably with enough time, but for sure, things like open the box, remove the chassis, mount it in the rack, screw in the 6 screws to this level of torque, plug it in, the blue light flashing means this.
So to stay ahead of the curve, we really as writers need to think way beyond the descriptive that we do to say, if we want to continue as writers, we really have to work on our narratives and our storytelling and get really great at that. Because that's where we might have an edge right now.
So people get very upset with me when I say a computer will take your job. I mean, anyone who's telling you it won't is just glossing over it to make you feel good. But a computer will eventually take your job as a technical writer. I'm really sorry. I love technical writing. I've done it my whole life. But it is what it is. And I think that the first thing it will take over is these rote things. The narrative will come later because narrative is more difficult to write than steps and instructions. It just is. We all know it is. It's much easier to write, plug it in, watch the lights blink.
I don't know. If I had to make a prediction, I would think that the first narrative would be, and I think I've seen some of these on Twitter where they sign up an artificial intelligence bot or a being to have a social media presence and come out with social media content. The unfortunate part is it started learning all of our worst and most horrifying tendencies before it started learning the beautiful speak to the soul side of the human. And those bots got really racist and really sexist really fast.
That is its own universe of a topic. The ethics, the prejudice, what we have out there for a machine to learn from is horrific. It really is. And much is being written about ethics and that whole field. And it is going to be a problem. We should be looking very carefully at what we have right now before we start uploading it into a corpus. Things slip in, we don't even know. We don't even know. I accidentally titled a blog post 2 months ago, or a CEO note, with something that I had no idea was offensive. I'm not going to repeat it. It wasn't bad words. It wasn't, but I had no idea. And I was mortified. So these things slip in and we don't know it. We really need a scrub.
Yeah.
Like bleach, like
oddly enough, I'm working with an artificial intelligence program right now for natural language. As you speak, it starts flagging and identifying any words that you use that have a bias. Because as an older person, I am, it's really quite possible that I could be saying things that have a bias because I was raised in an era where we had, and we still continue to have a lot of bias, but I have a background that's basically extremely biased. So being able to flag those as much as possible right now, to me, seems to be something that we need to be building into our AI checkers. And that's just a small way. And I think it's a great way to start with some of the descriptive things like technical writing before we get into some of the more emotive and more human-centric, feeling sort of things. That's just a thought that I have.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Using AI to eliminate the bias that we could put into AI is a great recursive use. I mean, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, after the call, hang on, I'll show you the interface for it.
Awesome. Awesome. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait. That would be great. Super.
Well, we probably should be wrapping up really quickly here. Just a really quick comment before you show us your book and tell us where you find us. What future are we looking at for AI right now? Near future.
It's fast and furious. I mean, the developments are exponentiating in terms of the speed. We've been working on AI for decades, but even the past 5 years have seen so much advancement that we're exponentiating on ourselves. So it's very hard to predict exactly where it's going, but I think we're going to see, but I'll try. I think we're going to see continued use of AI for analysis. Analysis is a place, we didn't discuss it, but because we were talking about delivering content, but analysis is a place where AI is being employed, whether it's descriptive analysis, predictive analysis, or prescriptive analysis. There's 3 different kinds of analysis that AI engines can do for another day. That's already here. I know it's a big field. I think that it's going to be a few years before we have natural language generation that is good enough to even start to compete with technical writers. I don't think we're in danger, right this very second, but I do expect to see at some point, certainly my prediction, Val's crystal ball, whoever my crystal ball is, 10 years from now, I would not at all be surprised if natural language generators were able to create content for very direct scripted types of things. And we'll see where it goes. I mean, it's fascinating. And the issue of bias will always have to be front and center. What you train the engine to know is what the engine knows. So, yeah. That's my thoughts.
I completely agree with you. And that's one of my huge concerns with AI. And, we need AI watchdogs, and we need AI to keep an eye on AI too. Because like you said, the whole garbage factor of all of our biases, we don't want that embedded deeply into our AI program, like it's embedded deeply into my programming, right? I want to eliminate as much of that as possible from my own natural language and from my own heart and soul.
Yeah.
So tell us where we can find you.
Well, you can find me. My company is contentrules.com. You can email me at vals@contentrules.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my book, The Personalization Paradox, on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or the XML Press website, or contentrules.com/TPP, The Personalization Paradox. And if you decide to order it from there, you get extra goodies. So things that we've created to go along with